Hello there. We're in England. We're in a place called BRILL, which is, I don't know, hour and a half drive west of London. It's a lovely little village. It's the kind of village which, if it was on film, there'd be like a summer fete, a summer fair, and a murder. It's kind of Agatha Christie-like, if you know what I'm saying. Those kinds of Sunday afternoon TV shows when something nefarious happens, but everyone has a nice time. And I'm here specifically because they've got a windmill. Now, drawing windmills is one of those things I guess every urban sketcher has to do at some point. I guess it's a cliche, but oh god, they're huge fun. And you don't see them very often. Not old ones like this. I mean, this was built in the late 1685, I think. And although, of course, when you say it was built that long ago, it's probably had all possible components of it replaced hundreds of times since then, because they were very active kind of devices, kind of early industrial machinery, obviously creating flour from corn in order to make bread. Is it corn? I don't know. I'm no agriculturalist. Anyway, drawing a windmill is interesting because it's so strangely tricky. You've got the sort of the blandness, the simplicity of the main body of the mill itself, which is not a problem. And then you've got what becomes quite complex sails, these kind of four arms. Before you actually look at the real thing, you assume they're quite simple shapes for kind of open panels. But when you actually stand in front of them, they're far more complex than you think they're going to be. Or at least that was my experience. And so, as I sometimes do, when I've got a complex thing in front of me, I'll put some pencil lines down first, just so I know it fits on the page. And because I've got the kind of extreme sort of perspective of sitting in front of this windmill and looking up at it, looking at these sails, I was actually concerned the sails might move as well, although actually they don't, or at least they didn't. I assume that these are kind of locked off to prevent them from spinning around and hurting themselves, because obviously this is no longer an active mill. It's really more of a museum piece, a historical piece. You can visit inside and, you know, do the tourist thing. Anyway, I digress. So I've laid down some pencil marks just to kind of make sure that these four kind of sails sit in a dramatic and interesting way on the page, in a way that kind of fills it. That's the thing about the windmill. Again, when you see it on the horizon, they look like little sweet, charming kind of cliches, you know? Holland, that kind of stuff. But when you're up close, they're strangely mechanical. They're like kind of medieval dragons, you know, they're wooden and noisy and wind blows through them, and they kind of feel more alive than you think they're going to. So I wanted to bring some of that out, and it's obviously has to be the sails. The sails are the thing that's doing that. And even though they're static, I wanted to give them that kind of energy that you could feel they're kind of wanting to spin, the kind of the potential they have for drama, you know, for turning, for making noise, creaking, and all, you know, the kind of thing, that kind of energy that comes from that rotation under the, you know, the force of the wind. So I've gone in here with a white acrylic pen. I like to imagine that each time I start a drawing, bear in mind I'm traveling with a set, so, you know, I've got a limited range of potential starting sort of pens, but each time I start a drawing, I like to think of as I choose a pen that's right for the scenario, right for what I'm drawing. I'm always pleased when it's a different pen each time. It will be super unusual for me to use a white pen to start with. Normally a white pen is something that comes in quite late in the process, but because the dominant element in this drawing is going to be the sails, and the sails are white, it's completely natural to start with that white pen. And that's the key for me. Anyway, you start with the thing that matters most and you get it right. So when you're doing a windmill that has white sails, you start with the white sails. And if that works, then everything else is going to work. In fact, to be honest with you, if the sails work, then nothing else really matters. You'll see the way I'm doing the timber planking of the main body of the mill, and I'm doing it in quite a casual way because I'm already thinking, no, it's kind of, well, I was going to say job done. Obviously, it's not job done. But if the sails have the energy, then everything else is just finishing off. So with a drawing like this, literally within the first 10% of of the drawing, or 5% of the drawing, drawing those sails, I already know the drawing's done. Of course, it really doesn't make sense, but that sense of the worrying bit is done. Or at least the bit that might give you problems, or that might, not go the way you want to. That's done. And if it's worked, everything else is going to work. Nothing else can really get in the way. So that means you can kind of relax, because everything else is just, filling in the details around it. Now, I do go back to the sails numerous times, and that's an important part of this process for me. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to kind of lead the drawing, sort of layer upon layer, sort of phase upon phase, and get it to a certain level, take it to stage 1. And so all kind of goes up to stage 1, and then I'm going to look at it again and say, okay, let's take it all to stage 2. Now, stage 2 for me is going there with the Indigraph Fountain Pen, which is loaded with rotring ink, which is a waterproof ink. The Indigraph is one of those rare fountain pens that can take a waterproof ink. It's my only fountain pen I use anymore. I've gone through hundreds, well, not hundreds, that's a lie. I've gone through dozens of fountain pens in my sketching life, and that's it now. I've found the one. Sometimes with sketching, with any kind of artistic sort of performance, certain things, you're always looking for the next new thing, like maybe an acrylic pen, for example. It's always fun to find a new one. I don't think I'm ever going to find another, or at least I'm never going to find a better fountain pen than the Indigraph. It's just, that's it now. I've done it. I've done the one. And when you've got it, you've got it. Anyway, the lovely thing about the use of this kind of ink is, of course, it dominates the acrylic line beneath it, because of its kind of indelible, it's solid, it's not watered, it's not going to blur or blend or rub off, or it's just like a very sturdy, reliable ink. A rotring ink is the kind of ink that you put in a technical pen. In the old days, if you were an architect, for example, you would draw on tracing paper or drafting film or vellum or those kinds of old sort of translucent materials that an architect would use, and you'd use something like a rotring ink because of its sort of sturdy reliability. Some inks are kind of art inks, kind of made in small batches, but a rotring ink is a technical ink. It's a professional ink for kind of engineers and architects. It's a different kind of class of ink. It doesn't come in hundreds of pretty colors, It comes in black. There is no real blue rotring pen ink, or at least there are, but they're kind of like copies. They look like rotring ink, but they're not quite. Anyway, I digress again. It's lovely to have this pen in your hand. It's lovely to have it loaded with this ink, because you can just kind of sit back and enjoy how it rides over the top of this undercurrent of the white acrylic. It's a very kind of sketchily pleasure. It's a weird thing when you're a sketcher. Obviously, you spend a lot of time sketching, obvious, but the feel of the sort of the nib, the brush, the feel of the ink, the paint, that becomes very much part of the Zen-like quality, because you can imagine you're sitting there for an hour, whatever, scratching away, and the feel becomes kind of the sort of majority of the emotional contact you have. You'd think it's about sight. You'd think it's all in the eyes, but and of course, a lot of it is in the eye. But once you've looked at the windmill 10 times, 20 times, you know the windmill. You don't have to continuously look up at it. You're only just kind of looking up to remind yourself of what you already know to be true about it. The majority of the time, you're looking at your drawing and you're feeling the pen and feeling how it's reacting. And so I guess it must be like how some people drive around a racetrack, and you're no longer really looking at the bends ahead, because you know exactly where the bends of the racetrack are. Instead, you're feeling the tires on the road, and you're on the track. You're feeling their grip. You're feeling the kind of the engine sound and that sort of vibration, and sort of being super aware of the kind of mechanical side of it, because you're as one. You want it to be a performance where everything's sort of tuned and working together. So you're super aware. I'm almost always very aware of when the ink starts to run low in a pen, or when the acrylic brush pen starts to slightly dry, you become super attuned to that. It's a very interesting kind of connection you end up having with these kinds of tools, you know, when you've done multiple drawings like this. Now you can see I've used a blue paper, very subtle little Talens paper. Nice paper. It sucked up quite a lot of ink, and you can probably see the way the ink as it's going on will kind of pool and then fade as it sort of is absorbed by the paper. It's quite an interesting moment because the ink will often go down quite heavy, and you'll feel as if you've applied too much of it, and then it will gently kind of soften, and that's quite fun because it enables you to kind of know exactly where the ink is going down. You can kind of see it, and then it sort of settles itself down a bit in quite a nice stylish way. It feels quite alive. It doesn't feel like a passive act. It's one of the fun things about using ink rather than using watercolor. There's something about ink itself inherently that has a bit of character to it. It's surprising, I think, that most, that not more urban sketchers use ink. There tends to be a sort of an obsession with watercolors. And I get it, you know, watercolors, you know, the little half pans of cubes of color, they're super convenient to carry around with you, being they're very portable. It's the most portable medium of all. But ultimately, when I carry around watercolor, I tend to use 3, 4, 5 colors. So it's not that I'm using dozens of the things. So I can use 2, 3, 4 inks, and it doesn't actually take up much more space in my bag. I tend to either I'll keep the inks in the actual bottles they come with, or sometimes I'll take a kind of watered down version, because often the raw ink itself is too intense. And actually one of the nice budgetary benefits of using ink is you can water it down and it goes an awfully long way. So I have little kind of jars, the kind of jars you would get in a hotel when you get a little breakfast jam, a little breakfast jelly, and you use all the kind of lovely strawberry stuff up, and then you pocket the jar rather than have the hotel throw it away. And that becomes, you know, one of your color carriers for the next few years. Just one more thing on ink, if you'll allow me. The convenience, the ability to open a little jar and there's your color ready. No mixing, no kind of preparation. I always found, and it's going to make me sound odd, but that sense of you open up the palette, the watercolor, and you get a little bit of water and you wet it and you make the color, and the next time you make the color it's a slightly different density, and that always felt a bit boring, you know. I felt a bit laborious having to make the color wet. It's just like, oh god, do I really have to do that every time I want some color? I'm just too lazy for that. Again, lazy is the wrong word, isn't it? But it just feels like an old technology to have to kind of mix colors every time. I'm too busy drawing, too busy sketching to become a colorist, trying to match a batch of blue from the batch of blue I made 10 minutes ago. You'll note, by the way, we've got to the shadowing stage. I often have a couple of Tombow brushes, which I call my shadow pens, and they're really doing a brilliant job of faking the shadow on these, of the sail on the body of the windmill. This was not where the shadow was. The shadow moves, of course, because the sun moves, and to be honest with you, the chances of the shadow being in the place that I think is dramatically the most interesting is, like, you know, what, 1 in 12 hours, so 1 in 12. So I'm just not prepared to sit there and wait for the sun to be in a position where I get the shadow where I want it to be. That's just nonsense. So I'm going to draw the shadow where I want it to be, kind of aesthetically. And that's all there is to be said. I am in no way trying to be honest or a true representative of anything, really, let alone where the sun was and where the shadows were. And I'm also, frankly, I know that would just be like a bit boring, like a technical exercise, a bit like an exam. You know, can you draw the shadow in the exam? Oh God, just even saying the words makes me cringe. It's quicker, more immediate, more exciting, and more creative for you to decide where that shadow is for your benefit. So go for it. Don't get all hung up with where the shadow is when you're looking, because the next time you look, that damn thing's moved, and you don't want to get frustrated by that. You know, the spinning of the planets, for heaven's sake. We've got far more important things to do, like getting the drawing finished and going and having some lunch. A very nice restaurant, by the way, actually what the English would call a gastropub, which means a pub that serves good food more than it serves good beer. So more food, more restaurant than pub, but it looks like a pub. It's in Brill. I won't name it in case there's some kind of reason I shouldn't name it, but it's kind of one of the only ones in Brill. So if you're ever west of London looking for a windmill and you're in Brill, because where else are you going to go, have a check of this pub. It's on the eastern side. There's a hint. So we're coming to the end now, aren't we? As you can tell from the thumbnail, it's one of the lovely things about these kinds of drawings. As I said at the beginning, within the first 10% of the drawing process, it's kind of there. You know it's going to be fine. And everything else is really enjoying, you know, the mark making and, you know, how you're going to do the sky and how you're going to do the sort of the greenery around it. So there's a real kind of release that happens. It genuinely becomes a pleasure to do. Sometimes when you're doing a sketch, it can feel a bit of a task. You know, you've got, oh my God, this is going to be a tough one. And sometimes it's nice within as short a time as possible to feel like, yay. So here you go. Nice and quick sketch of Brill Windmill. Hope you've enjoyed yourself. Why not go out there with a piece of blue paper, a white pen, and see what you can do. Find a bit of old industrial heritage.